You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 264 of the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. And today we're in, I know you said Derbyshire there, but we're in Lancashire. But yeah, Cath grew up in Derbyshire. I am speaking with Cath Morley, who, like I say, grew up in Derbyshire, but now farms in Lancashire with her husband, Chris. Together, they milk 150 Holsteins using 3 robots, and they rear all their replacement heifers. They're calving all year round. And they're on a co-op contract. And Cath is also an opinion writer for Farmers Weekly, which is where some of you may know her from. Cath, thank you so much for doing this. Welcome to Meet the Farmers.
Oh, thank you. No, it's no problem. It's nice to meet you and to have a bit of a chat. I quite like airing my views, so it's good.
You do. And yeah, we're definitely going to dig into some of your pieces a bit later on. But first of all, let's talk about the farm. Give us some context to your farm and your business.
Right. So we milk 150 cows. I suppose the way things are going now, that's quite a small farm, isn't it, really? We're a small family farm. That's how we like to pitch ourselves, I suppose. We are really small for this area. I mean, neighbours across the road milking, I don't know, 320. Some farms down a few miles away, 1,000 cows, 800 cows.
Yeah.
Roti parlours. So we're quite small, but we're happy like that because it's what we can manage. There's just me and Chris and our 2 kids. One's 14 nearly, and the other one's just 9. So they're not really of, I can't really put their nose to the grindstone quite yet and make them. Well, I do try to put it out there, but they don't, unless there's a toy tractor on the horizon. That's the only time I ever get any paid work out of either of them. So yeah, we rear all our own replacements. We are just a little bit up in air at the minute about how sustainable that is for the 2 of us to keep doing, because it's time consuming. We have got a part-time member of staff who works a couple of mornings and a couple of afternoons a week. He's really good and he's enthusiastic. But the robot system is such that you can't switch off the milking parlour at night and then go anywhere without knowing that this, you can go places, but you can't go overnight, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. If we're going to go overnight somewhere, we have to make sure someone's staying here, and there's all sorts of things we have to put in place. So we are just umming and ahhing a little bit about our future in the industry, I suppose, and if we can sustain it and sustain a work-life balance at the same time, because it is quite hard. The cows milk fairly well most of the time. We have been up 36, 37 litres as an average. We've just dropped a bit going on to first cut silage. It's all like everybody, I think, everywhere. It's not very good. It's
been quite a year.
Yeah, there's just nothing in it. It doesn't smell of anything. We're looking at stuff to put in the diet to try and sort of encourage them a bit, but we just haven't found that fire yet. They're sort of just hovering and they're looking after themselves, and they've got great condition on them.
Focus on that.
Yeah, so focus on the positives. They're massive. But yeah, they're just not putting the litres in the tank at the moment. But that changes, doesn't it, with things, and hopefully we can balance the diet. We've just bought some Trafford Gold actually, which we've not fed before. We can't get Brewers Grains, which we've always fed, but we can't get any as a nation. We must not be drinking as much beer as we were.
Yeah, might be it.
Yeah,
might be it. Tell us a little bit about the robots. I'm interested in. So, when did you start, for example, and what difference has it made to the business, but to life generally?
Yeah, they've been in 14 years actually, just last week. Yeah, it will be. Gosh.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so when we put them in, there weren't many robots around really. It was Chris and his dad. I wasn't as involved in the farm then, mainly because I had a 2-month-old baby, and you can't always be doing everything, can you? So, um, and Chris looked at them in the first instance and he was like, oh, I really want to put these in, but I don't think Dad will be that keen. Anyway, went to look at one farm who'd got them in already and not had them in very long, and sort of Dave turned to Chris and went, we're having them, and if we don't have them, we're not milking anymore.
Wow.
And
Because I mean,
and
that
that's
was quite
it.
pioneering at the time.
It was. And Dave absolutely loved them from the second they went in. The only downfall was he smoked a lot more. He had dry hands all the time. I mean, when you're in the parlour, you have to purposely stop, don't you? Like, have a cigarette. Whereas when we got the robots in, he was just leaning over the fence with the cigarette, So I loved it. I think the best day of his life is when we filled the pit in. We filled the pit in and made it into a handling race for the cows, which is really good for getting them into the foot crush and all sorts of things.
Okay.
It's really handy. So it was quite pioneering and it was revolutionary, really. I think the cows adjusted to it amazingly. Us, not as much so, because it's quite hard for humans to get out of the habit of being in the cow building
Of
twice a
course.
day, every day. You sort of have to break that habit purposely. And I would say probably only over the last maybe 4 years, we've left the cows to it, not left them to it, but we haven't pushed as many cows. So when they're on the red list, you go, oh God, there's a red list, and you have to go and find them. But it's about trusting them to do what they should. And they do. And if you just, we don't have any push cows now really at all. The odd new calved heifer that needs reminding, or the odd late lactation cow that Chris might want to keep a closer eye on towards the end of the lactation. It'll be the ones that we go and check and maybe just say, come on, remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't really push many at all, which is a really good position to be in. Like, we are not as tired in the day, so now it's 5 o'clock, it's milking time. Chris is carting slurry.
Yeah.
So and in half an hour he's going with our oldest son on a tractor run for the evening, and they can go because it's fine. It starts at 6 o'clock. We're not milking. That is really good.
Dairy farmers with time.
Yeah, but you have to still make the time, and I think that's also something with the robot system that there's always something else to do, isn't there?
Of course.
So you don't necessarily make time for family stuff. And on the flip side of that, we're always on call because it's hard to find our part-time member of staff. He has got the alarms on his phone, but we don't really feel that we can say, right, we're going away tonight, so you're on call all night.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely one. I mean, my next question was going to be, are there any downsides?
Yeah, I would say that's probably, at least with a parlour system, you turn it off at 7:30 at night and you're done for the night. We don't get, touch wood, many robot alarms. We do quite well. We're not these sort of, some farms have a terrible time and they're always ringing and it's like horrendous. We it's not that bad. But you can guarantee they always ring either at 2 o'clock in the morning or just as we've got in the car with the kids to go out for the afternoon. And because there's nobody else here, like when Chris's mum and dad were alive, it was fine because they were here. So we'd alternate weekends off. And I think in that situation, if there's 2 or 3 families of the same, on the farm, and you can sustain the 3 families and a robot system because they're expensive to maintain. It's great because the flexibility is there. Then you have that flexibility. If we were looking at replacing the robots, which we will be probably in the next couple of years, we would have to think very carefully about putting another robot system in because we haven't got that cover to help us out.
Do you think that's something that people considering robots, do you think they consider that enough?
People that I've spoken to recently, where did I go? I went to somewhere in Manchester. Oh, in London. I went to the Houses of Parliament in April to talk to some MPs of the EFRA committee, which was quite interesting.
As you do. That's great.
And I met a lad there from Scotland who was he was just putting some in, and we had that chat actually. And I did say, you do realise that you need extra people. So it's all right because my brother, we've got 2 farms. My brother has one and I have the other, and when I go away, he looks after things. And so I think people do consider that. I think probably more so now, maybe because I think when we were putting them in, it was the robots were all sold on, oh, you know, it's amazing, you're going to have a great work-life balance, it's going to be marvelous. I don't know whether they just push that quite as much now with the robot sales pitch. I think they might have changed it slightly for cow health. I think it's
Yeah.
going down that route rather than promising the farmers, you know, you're going to have an amazing life.
More people have cottoned on, yeah.
Yeah, I think the cows have an amazing life because they do. They, you know, they're quiet and you can walk in the building and they're not bothered. You know, we had a group of beavers last night, cubs who came last night for a farm walk, and they're not the quietest, are they? A group of 8 and 10-year-olds, and they were, you know, coming up to the robot and still going in the robots, and you know, they're just, yeah, they do. You know, cow health wise, it's brilliant.
Let's talk a little bit about you and your route into this. You grew up in Derbyshire
I did,
on a
yeah.
farm. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so in the middle of the Peak District in Derbyshire, in the Hope Valley. I don't think it was ever as busy with tourists as it is now. I mean, I go home I
Yeah.
still call it home, it's still home, to visit my mum and my brother because my family all still live there in the same place. And it's so busy, like, oh, nightmare. It's always on Countryfile.
Yeah.
It's always on
Yeah.
Countryfile.
Blame them.
People walking up Mantor, you know, the Great Ridge, and there it is, and yeah, and oh, it is a nightmare. But it's a beautiful place to go up, and I don't think you realise until you leave how nice it is. You know, I go to my mum's and look at the view from her house, and just think, oh, it's, you know, it's just beautiful, just
Yeah.
beautiful.
Isn't that often the case with almost wherever we grow up as well? You never sort of notice that.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think you. I think that's what me and Chris say about our kids. You know, I hope that when they've grown up and they've realised just what they've had and what they've
Yeah.
got, because I don't think you realise that, do you? I didn't realise that, and I think it was only when I became a mum and I wrote in a card to my mum on my first Mother's Day when I was a mum, and I just wrote, you know, you don't realise how hard a job it is until you're doing it yourself. And you know, she burst into tears. And my mum is the
Oh,
most
really?
emotional person. You know,
Yeah.
she's very old school. She doesn't, I'm not saying she's unemotional, she doesn't show her emotions at all.
Yeah.
And she's burst into tears and she says, I'm so glad that you've finally realised. I was like, I know, but like your
It's what it
parents,
took.
yeah, well, yeah, and it does, because you don't realise you sacrifice all of your life to give it to somebody else.
Yeah.
But it was great. You know, they had only 40 acres. Mum still owns the farm. My brother's a builder. My dad was a builder, and my sister-in-law now grazes the ground at Aston as part of her farm, because she's got quite a big beef and sheep farm. So we have sheep just to graze it down. Growing up, oh gosh, we had everything. Pigs. We had pigs. Dad was quite, well, he was never really scared of trying stuff. He just
Okay.
thought, oh, we'll have some pigs. So we got some pigs. And then he built a big steamer in like a shed
Okay.
to steam potatoes, so he could give the pigs like warm steamed potatoes in the morning. It was the most
Wow.
bonkers idea.
I have never heard that before, but
No, I don't know whether it was, I don't think it's ever been a thing. And so I remember, like, that was sort of one of my jobs to help him before school. I would like go and get wheelbarrows full of steamed hot potatoes to take to feed the pigs. I don't know why he thought it would be. I'm sure there was a thought process behind why they would be better cooked than raw.
I'm sure there is. I mean, I'm sure they
But I don't
taste a
know what
lot
that
nicer.
was, because I never was privy to that information. And like rooting through what we used to go and get bread waste from the bakery in Sheffield, from Fletcher's bakery, and we'd like root through all the tea cakes and like, and anything that was still in its wrapper, we were like, right, turn in the freezer. So we had pigs. We always had sheep. There was always sheep around. At one point, we had a lot of hens. We tried to sell eggs. He'd just try anything. We had a joinery. He made all sorts of joinery things as well. And then latterly, pedigree Hereford cows, because my mum
Okay.
really loved Herefords. So they had those up until Dad died.
Yeah.
They had a little herd of pedigree Herefords.
So did they buy the farm? Where
It
did the
was
farm sort of
my
come in?
mum's grandparents. No, it wasn't my grandparents. My mum's parents,
Okay.
who had the farm. My grandma was orphaned during the First World War. Her dad was sent to war, obviously, as they were. And then her mum died. And I think my mum did a bit of research about this. Her mum died from mastitis randomly, which
Wow.
I know, which sort of in 1919 was probably quite common, I imagine, but
Gosh.
certainly not very common now. So
No.
they were
Thankfully, you
orphaned.
don't hear about that.
No, I know. They were orphaned. So I think my gran was she 13, and she had some older brothers and sisters and some younger brothers and sisters, quite a lot of them. So the younger ones went to live with family in Derby, and then my gran was sent into service, which was quite common for girls of that age in those days. So she was sent into service at the house next door to where the farm is, where my mum lives. And then she worked there for a few years, and then she met my granddad. They got married, and they were given the opportunity to buy the farm from the people who my gran worked for, which they did. I think that was in the 1930s. They bought that. So they had to save up a lot because it was quite
Yeah.
bad times in the 30s. And then they had my mum, and mum grew up at the farm, and then she met my dad. They moved not very far, but in the same area, and eventually ended up moving to the house where my gran worked in service. They bought that house.
Right. Oh,
Which
wow.
is where
Everything
I
comes
grew up.
around.
Yeah.
Okay.
And mum says that my gran couldn't believe that she was sat having Christmas dinner at the table where she used to, be a servant,
Yeah.
basically.
What a story.
So yeah, my mum
Yeah.
and
Must
dad
be.
bought that house, which they did sell eventually because they moved back to Yew Tree, which is the farm where they live now. So
Okay. So yeah, we really didn't move very far, but
no.
in some ways, yeah. I mean, certainly your grand, she came a long way as well.
Yeah, and I think that's like my mum gets quite emotional when she talks about that story because anything could have happened, couldn't it? She could have gone to a family who treated her really badly. She went to a family actually that treated her really nicely. Like my mum wore a ring for quite a long time, which is Mrs. Wells's engagement ring, and that
Oh, wow.
came from the family who looked at who my gran was in service. They were obviously a really nice family, and they gave my gran and granddad the opportunity to buy the farm that we still have now. So
Amazing. So how did you meet Chris and how did you come to Lancashire?
well, we met at the Yorkshire show. There you go,
Oh, wow.
in a
Okay.
very rainy Black Sheep bar.
It's one of those few occasions where Derbyshire plus Lancashire plus Yorkshire come together.
Yes, that's it. That is exactly it. Yes. I was stood outside the Black Sheep bar with an umbrella because it was chucking it down and we couldn't get inside. And he just asked me if he could stand under my umbrella. And I was like, "Are you single?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Yeah, okay." And there we go.
The rest is history.
Yeah,
And
it was quite random.
yeah, but you said you didn't get involved in the business straight away.
No, I worked for Booths actually, the
Ah, okay.
supermarket in the just well northwest based, aren't they, Booths?
Yep.
I worked for them. I worked in Sheffield. I was working for a children's charitable trust called Worlow Hall Farm, which was great actually. Loads of kids from inner city disadvantaged areas just come in for day trips to the farm through school. An eye opener and amazing all at the same time. It was fab. They were a lovely bunch of people to work for. And it was really rewarding giving those kids just not even the education about where food comes from to a certain extent, but the opportunity to stroke a chicken
Yeah,
or a
of course.
lamb or pick an egg up out of a hen hook because they wouldn't normally get that. And I think one of the first weeks when I worked there, they were like, "Oh, this is the welly hut," and I was like, "Why do you need a welly hut?" And they were like, "Not everybody has wellies." I was like, "What do you mean?" But obviously you don't if you live in town because you don't necessarily need
Exactly.
them, do you? So it was really a really great place to work, and I worked there for 4 or 5 years. Set them up a farm shop so that they could sell their produce through the farm shop because it's in quite a decent part of Sheffield, quite an affluent area. So they got a nice farm shop business there, and I think now
Okay.
since then they've opened a cafe and stuff and like moved things on a little bit. And so I left there to go and work at Booths because obviously Chris couldn't move the farm and the dairy cows.
No, this is true.
I moved me. So yeah, and I went to work for Booths for, I think I went there about 18 months, and yeah, I quite enjoyed it actually. It's quite that it was good to see it from the other side.
Hello, listeners. I'm just pausing the episode for a minute to tell you about a brand new food and farming event that is coming up in November. The Land Alive conference will be at the Royal Bath and West Showground in Somerset on the 22nd and 23rd of November. Land Alive is being billed as a new sustainable food and farming conference for the Southwest, making the case for transition to a more localised regenerative farming and food system in the region and across the UK. There's an amazing lineup of well-known speakers, and I'll also be there making a podcast for the event. To find out more and buy tickets, check out landalive.co.uk. That's landalive.co.uk.
That sort of links me in a sort of roundabout way to your writing for Farmers Weekly, because I mean it's only when it comes to topic areas, and I've sort of been through. I've had a bit of a trawl through some of your writing. I mean, one of your articles just sort of brought this out. You have it says on this that you've been described as the glue that holds everything together.
Oh yeah.
Quoting here, a huge responsibility and one that you can't delegate. Inevitably, now and again, that glue comes unstuck. I wonder if you could just unpack that a bit for us in terms of what that means to you, because I'm sure this will ring true for so many people.
Is this? Oh, I'm trying to wrap my brains out to which one this was in. Was this the one where I was writing about women and
Yeah,
about
that's the one.
the responsibility that you feel inside? I think
Yeah,
yeah, the glue that holds everything together. Yeah, it was one of our neighbours who said that, and we were going through a pretty difficult time. With Chris's dad was very poorly. It was just before he died, and I just felt like things were just spiraling out of control. And they're like, you are the glue that holds everything together. You are the one that everybody comes to. I think there's a lot of women on farms who are that person. We do everything with the children. I mean, I'm not saying Chris doesn't do anything with them, because he does. He's great, but he's not here a lot because he can't be, because he's out
yeah,
there. I, I think we find ourselves in that position where we're spinning a lot of plates. I certainly do, and it does. I mean, like I said, we're heading into winter. It's like, I hate winter. I feel like it comes at me like a train in a tunnel that you can't get out of. The long, dull, dark days, and I just think that the pressure then, and you internalize it a lot and you take it on. So there'll be more poorly calves, because there is. So that then in turn means that my jobs take longer outside, which then means I'm not in the right place inside, because the kids need their tea. They
yeah,
need help with their homework. They need this, they need that, they need the other, they need taken to cubs, they need taken to youth club. And so it's a knock-on effect of everything, isn't it? And we do all that. We do a lot outside. I do all the paperwork bits. I do all the banking. I do all paying all the bills. It's funny because me and Chris were talking about this the other day, and he's just saying, if anything happened to you, I don't know any of the banking passwords. I was like,
yeah. Again,
no,
a
you
really
don't.
common thing.
And you don't know how to use the internet banking. I just show you the balance, and you go, ugh.
Yeah,
And then, and then that's it. And I think, I think there's a lot of internal stuff that you say, right, well, I can't say anything, because if I say anything, then somebody else, Chris, will get upset, and then I don't want to bother him with my bother, because it's not as important. And yeah, I do think there's a lot of pressure that comes with being a farmer's wife, because I am a farmer, and I do the job and the work, but I am also a farmer's
you're
wife.
also
And
a farmer's wife.
I
Yeah,
think a lot of people also think that that's now a derogatory term, and maybe we don't, can't address you as a farmer's wife, but I am, and part and parcel of doing everything that I do is taking on the other stuff as well. And yeah, you do feel like if I walked away tomorrow, everything would fall apart, and you can't delegate that responsibility, because it isn't. I don't know. I can't put it into words. It's a really funny feeling. Like it's just
yeah.
really strange.
How much, and again, not in your particular case necessarily, but we're broadening it out a bit and generalizing a bit, maybe. But how much do you think that is just expected? That's what whether that's someone who marries in the into the family. Obviously, they're not always going to be expected to get completely involved. But is there an element of that?
I'm not sure it's an expectation. I think I look at my mum and I compare myself to her, and our tea was
Yeah.
always on the table, bang on 6 o'clock. My dad never expected that, and he was always late. But a mum was always mad. so, and I think you just I think it's an unrealistic expectation for me to think that, I mean, it's took me 20 years to feel bad about buying pastry, because mum was really good at making pastry, and I buy it because I can't make pastry because I'm rubbish at it and I don't have time. So I buy it. And I said, God, don't tell me, mum, she'll be furious.
Yeah.
I think the expectations, I don't think, come from the other halves necessarily, or even, Chris's mum, she was quite poorly. She had a lot of health issues, so she couldn't do a lot of stuff. She was, she had lupus, which is sort of quite
Oh, wow. Yeah.
a degenerative sort of condition that she wasn't able to do a lot of stuff. She never expected me to do anything like I do. But so no, I don't feel the expectation necessarily, but I feel it's a pressure that I've put on myself.
Yeah.
I think that's probably, I can't speak for other women because every situation is different.
Yeah, exactly.
I do think there is I think it's an internal thing. I think it's a girl thing where you just think, oh my God, I've got to do everything. And, these men can't do anything for themselves. And I'm sure,
I mean, that's probably fair a lot of the time. Yeah.
But it's not true though, is it? I think that's just, I look at how I grew up, and I suppose I want to replicate that. But as well as that, my mum was a full-time housewife. She didn't help on the farm particularly. She did with sheep and bits and bobs, but her main job was to bring us up, to feed us, and to keep the house tidy, because that's how it was, back then. It was more acceptable. And yeah, now I think we just take on more. So we want to do everything we want to do, but we take on the extra as well.
Yeah, there's that feeling of doing everything, isn't there? And actually having so many different hats that you're always juggling all those things, which happens, and you manage to do it, but it's very easy to slide into that, isn't it? Let's go back to Farmers Weekly and tell me about how you actually became an opinion writer for Farmers Weekly.
Well, I entered a competition. I mean, it's not even that exciting.
Oh, really? Okay.
I've always quite enjoyed writing. I did write a blog for a bit, but it sort of fell back. I started in COVID writing a blog, and I think that was just because I needed just to say how crap it was.
Yep.
I was stuck at home with kids and I couldn't deal with it. I did write a few ones that said how crap it wasn't, because that just happened to be how I was feeling at that time. So I did start that up, and then that sort of fell by the wayside. But I just quite enjoy writing stuff down, and I find it helps me. I also find that I can't particularly write things when I'm in a good mood. I find it quite hard to write if I'm buoyant. I think if I've got something to moan about, I feel a lot better, which you might gather from some of the things that I've written, because I'm not quite I'm a bit like, oh God, everything's rubbish. So I do. So, and I just thought, oh, you know what? I saw it on X, Twitter, whatever it is.
Yep.
It was just a thing that said, do you want to be a columnist? And I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it and thought, oh no, they won't want me. I'm just rubbish. And then one afternoon, I just thought, you know what? Sod it. I'm just going to try, because what's the worst can happen is I don't get it. And so I just sent this piece in, and I did send it to Chris's auntie, actually, just to read through it. So will you just read through this and see what you think? And she was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And I was like, all right, I'll send it then. So I had to go, and yeah, they rang me up and said, would you like to do it? And I was like, I couldn't say anything. I think I was so shocked. It's like, really? Oh, right, wow.
And then it happens. How do you come up with your topics? I remember having this conversation with Will Evans, who of course does it weekly and on the back page. But the opinion pieces are slightly different, aren't they? So
Yes,
how does that work in terms of, and it goes out with someone else, doesn't it, at the same time? And so
yes. Charlie
do
Flint
you
is
talk
my
together?
page mate. Yes. No, I've never met Charlie. I'd like to meet him actually because his columns are great and they're really funny. Um, but no, no, none of us really. I haven't met any of the other columnists. I met a couple of them at the Farmers Weekly Awards last year.
Okay.
I met a couple of them. So no, we don't really talk about what we're going to put in. It's funny because I'll start writing something that I think, oh yeah, to be really good, and then I get to the end and go, God, that's rubbish. Or it's like it's changed into something else. I do spend quite a lot of time editing them, and starting off. There's 2 or 3 pieces that I've written that, like the one I've just written that went in about Hope Show and about shows and how great they are at sort of getting messages out to the public and thing. I wrote that last year, but I could never write it good enough to think that it was good enough to go in. And it was only when we went down to the showgrounds this year and we unveiled the plaque on the barn in memory of my dad that actually I could think, oh, I've already written some of this.
Yeah, you've
And then
got
I
a
went
hook
back
then.
to it and started again. And there's 2 or 3 pieces. The piece I wrote for the competition hasn't gone in yet. I really love it and it's really nice. But I just haven't found that my slot comes in with when the timing of stuff is. As for other inspiration, really, it just, I can't particularly read through. I mean, it's supposed to be an opinion column and we're supposed to give our opinions on news of the day, but I find that quite hard. And I think that's because I write quite from inside.
Yeah.
I write probably quite similar to how Will writes, I think, because Will writes some great columns. And I know one of his was in a couple of weeks ago and I threw it across the table to Chris and went, read that, because he'd been beating himself up really badly about how we haven't done anything with the kids all summer and how, they're having a really rubbish childhood and we're just working all the time. And Will had written, and I was going to write a piece on that, but it hasn't just timed it right for the end of the summer holidays. And Will had written virtually what I would have written. And I was like, oh gosh, that's weird.
Okay.
It's like I'm reading my own words.
Yeah. Also, now that idea's been taken.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no. But it just generally I don't know. I honestly, I don't know where it comes from. I went to the Houses of Parliament, like I said, and I wrote a bit about that as well, because that was quite interesting and I could draw off that for stuff. And I wrote a piece about friends of ours who were losing their tenancy. And so, yeah, just, I think more life stuff for me rather than, looking at the latest Mitre about TB or, because as much as like an opinion column is maybe to not get people's backs up, because that's the wrong thing, but I like to write from in here, and I suppose I can't write what I'm not comfortable with. So, I've written a piece randomly about the menopause, which is like,
oh right,
that's
okay,
not gone in yet. I did send it to my editor, and we went with a different one just for the timings and stuff. But it's going to go in that, I think, because I think it's really important. Because I was talking to my sister-in-law about it, and we were sort of saying, 40% of the farming workforce roughly are women, aren't they?
exactly.
We're all going to face it. It's not even like having kids, because not everyone has kids for various reasons. But, it really affects work and how you feel about work and your mental stuff and everything. And I was like, I'm going to write that. And it might not go down very well with some of the readers in the Farmers Weekly because, they're not maybe in tone with that. But, it's like, well, some of them will. So I'm going to put it in.
Yeah. Do you get much feedback from readers?
Yes, actually. I think it depends what you put in. But I've randomly had a lovely letter off a chap who he sent it to Andrew Meredith, actually. And he sent me some photos of the letter, and it was just a really lovely letter about how he'd seen my name. And when he was like in his early 20s, I think he's in his 80s now. When he was in his early 20s, he met this girl called somebody Morley, and would I happen to know her, or would she have been my grandma, because he'd never got married and he would love to have like met her again. I was like, oh gosh, that's so sweet. And then I had to write back to him and say, no, I'm really sorry, I don't think we're related.
No relation at all.
But I was like, it's so lovely though, to like to have it was just a really touching thing. And then a couple of people have written into the magazine and sort of said they disagree with my points, or some people have said wholeheartedly how well I've written stuff. And it is really nice to have that feedback, and that people are reading what I'm writing.
Of course they are. Is there is there an article that you've written that you feel has resonated sort of strongly with readers, or stirred debate, or is there anything in particular?
I think the one I wrote about the tenant farmers probably stirred quite a lot of people up. A lot of people agreed with what I wrote about, the introduction of all the schemes that the landlords are taking stuff back in hand and sort of making tenants sort of homeless, basically, homeless and jobless. That sort of caused a bit. And also the first one I wrote about just about how hard it is and how difficult things are, and just there's no morale really anymore, and everybody feels a bit down about stuff. And quite a few people sort of emailed and said, oh, it is like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's funny, is it? I think particularly this year as well, and you definitely pick that up. And I think across sector, actually, it's odd. Normally, there'll be one or two sectors at different times of year, or in different particular years that will be down for whatever reason. But this at this particular period, it feels like it's industry wide. But one of the great things is, again, it comes down to that thing about farming, isn't it? And especially with Team Dairy, it is believing in that future, investing in that future, and believing in the long term.
Yeah, I think it makes it very difficult to believe in the future and invest in the long term when there's so much uncertainty and you don't know whether you're doing it for the right reasons or even why you're doing it. Sometimes I think
Yep.
it's just been a really tough 12 months, I think, for everybody, and dairy especially. I think we've seen, huge price increases, but nothing's really come down. The
No.
milk prices come down quite a lot, but we've not seen, molasses. We were looking at that the other day because we've been trying to put some molasses in the diet just to try and, I don't know, just make it taste nice. I've no idea. Sometimes you thought, let's just try this. And, it's gone up from 150 quid a ton to over 300 pounds a ton. I'm like, well, can't do that. Like, and I think that you just think, oh, everything's a brick wall sometimes. And I think people are quite fed up of that, aren't they? Fed up of feeling like everything's a hurdle. Sometimes you just want something just to take you and say, right, it's a straight run this.
Yeah.
Let's go for it. And it's
It always seems to be
really
jam
difficult.
tomorrow, and you can only have jam tomorrow for so long.
Yeah, and it's really hard. And I think, and like you said, it's unprecedented, I think, for all the sectors to feel like, what's the point anymore? And I don't think, got a new government, haven't we? And I don't think that's helping. The rumour mill is like going, isn't it, with that, inheritance tax, and, agricultural land's going to be brought into inheritance tax, and we'll all be screwed if that happens. And just everything really. And, the underspend at DEF, and you think, flipping heck, an underspend? How have you managed that?
Sure.
It's impossible to get the money. Like, I think I wrote that in one of my pieces when I addressed Steve Reed. He didn't reply, which is quite annoying. I just said, make things easier. It's really like there's all these grant schemes, there's hundreds of them. And everyone virtually requires a different account, a different password. And you just think, for goodness sake, put it all in an app. We can do that now, surely. We can do that. And just make it a lot easier for people to apply for grant money. And then put some kind of rules in place to stop the companies who supply the stuff for the grants putting their prices up ridiculously. Because that's all they do, isn't it? Put the price up and then, oh, you've got a grant for that. Oh, funnily enough, it's 40% more expensive.
Meet the Farmers is brought to you by RuralPod Media, the only podcast production agency to specialise in the rural sector. We're on a mission to make rural stories mainstream and help businesses, organisations and communities like you tell your story through podcasting. Podcasting is a fantastic way of connecting with your audience, whoever that might be, getting your message out there and networking with leaders in your niche. RuralPod Media can help you by launching your new podcast or helping you with the technical side. We also provide podcast training and an audit service if you already have a podcast. You're not sure where to take it to next. For more information or to book a call, visit ruralpodmedia.co.uk. That's ruralpodmedia.co.uk. With that all in mind, actually, let's turn to the future of dairy in terms of, and you sort of alluded to this earlier in the conversation, but how confident are you in the future of the sector? And sort of, if we look at trends going forwards, again, we reference to this at the beginning as well. We're shifting towards larger herds, but yeah, are we going to look to approach of more added value? Are we going? What do you think the future of the sector looks like?
I think the future of the sector, from our point of view, looks like it's going to be big farms. I think small farm cycles will get squeezed out. I think it'll be impossible for farms with 150 cows to milk like we do. I don't think it'll be impossible if we got rid of our robots, put a parlour back in, and went to a regenerative grass-based system. I think we could probably keep our 150 cows because our inputs will be a lot less. And our robot contract bill would not be there, and our electricity would not be as expensive. That said, we can't do that here because our land is just boggy. It's wet clay. I mean, we couldn't graze for the amount of days we'd need to graze. But generally speaking, I think we're going to see the decline of small family farms like ours. And I think there'll be the same amount of milk, because that's the trend, isn't it? You know, the same amount of milk is there from less cows because the genetics are better. And the big farms will just get bigger, and the supermarkets will lose their farmers leaning over a grassy gate on a grassy field, because that's what they use, isn't it? That's their marketing point.
You can bet that message will still be going.
Yeah, but that's not going to be the reality. I don't think. I can't see us being in dairy in the next 10 years. I think we'll come out because I think the cost of running the robots and the cost of the electricity and the water makes our margin too low, and we can't milk any more cows with the robots we've got. And I think there'll be a few people in that situation. A lot of people will just not have the stomach for it. I think the climate will make a few decisions for people. Like, it's getting harder on our farm. You know, it's wetter. It's wetter than it's ever been. And there's nothing we can do about what comes out of the sky. So I just think the big guys will get bigger and the small guys will phase out and maybe just go into land management or rent their farms out. I mean, we've looked at that, you know, we just think, oh, you know what, let's just rent the whole thing out. Let somebody else do it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, it's been a trend, isn't it? But it's really, if you go back, going on 20 plus years in terms of, I mean, back when my dad got out of dairy in 2001, I think, what's that, 14,000 dairy farmers then?
Yeah.
Now we're south of 5,000. So
yeah, a dying breed.
Yes, you're still there. You're still clinging on.
Yeah, I know, and you know, I think, and that's it's the sad thing, isn't it? Really, that, you know, we love what we do, and like, we've had this conversation so many times. Like, right, should we pack in? Yeah, we'll pack in. Well, we can't really sell the cows, and then I get all into, like, you know, we send them on the coal lorry, and I'm flipping crying. Oh, I really like that one. And I think if we'd be running a restaurant or a coffee shop, and, you know, it was like this, we'd just go, oh, you know what? Let's get rid. Yeah. But you're so emotionally involved in it.
So much part of it.
Yeah, and that is such a huge thing. It's so massive. And it's also such a lovely thing as well. You know, we love our cows. You know, they're great. We love them. So it's such a hard decision for those people to make it. They always say, oh, we feel much better after we've made the decision and after we've left. You know, there is life after cows, and everybody you talk to who's come out of dairy does not miss it. You know,
no, exactly.
I just think it's got to be on your own terms, hasn't it? I think that's important, and that's what we're sort of quite conscious of. That, you know, we don't want to come out because we have to, because that's really bad. If we're going to come out, we're going to make our own choice. We're going to stick to it and we're going to come out. I'll let you know after this winter.
I hope you're still going past this winter.
So we've done 5 weeks. We keep having this conversation with the accountant. Every time we meet the accountant and we're like, oh, we can't do this anymore. And he's like, well, you've only got like 3 winters and your robots will be paid off. I'm like, this is for you to say. It's like, we're already down to 2 now, and the robot loan will have gone, It's like, and we've been talking about this for months, for years, But while we keep laughing about it, we keep thinking, it's fine. We can keep laughing about it, and we're both sort of like happy. And Archie, our oldest now, he's sort of like, he loves tractors, so he's going off doing tractor work, which is giving Chris a little bit more time. We don't lead him to it completely, and he's only allowed to do certain jobs, like rolling, like everyone gets to do rolling, don't they?
Classic way to start.
Yeah. But he loves it, and he's like, he really likes it. They've gone on a tractor run now. They've just disappeared off on a tractor run, and Archie's like washed all the tractor off, polished it up, and done all the inside with his air freshener, like they do, off in his Canterbury shorts and his gilet.
Look the part as well.
Yeah.
Just before we wrap things up, because of your 2 hats with farming and the writing as well, just want to sort of like turn towards communications and general public communications in terms of we alluded to it as well, but like the realities of farming today, what's actually happening on the ground, the pressures. Is it important that general public know that? Because again, there's this classic argument, isn't there, as well, that lots of other industries, we don't know the ins and outs of what's going on, but they still provide us with a service or a product. How important is it that those sorts of messages get across?
I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it? Personally, I think it probably just makes things really negative. I don't want to know if our accountant is struggling to get the right software to run it. It doesn't bother me.
Exactly.
And I think having worked in retail as well, people really aren't bothered. I mean, that sounds really harsh, doesn't it? I feel really bad for saying all this, but they're not bothered. They want something in a basket that tastes nice. And I think that's, in a way, it's quite sad, but I also think it's how we've been led by the big supermarket chains to shop and to expect that everything is available all the time and it comes in a packet and we buy it and it's cheap. I think probably the general public and the consumer, I think probably need to know more truth, because I mean there's a lot of stuff goes around on social media and it gets out there, doesn't it? I mean, Chris Packham does a great job of like saying how bad farmers are and how we're, I don't know, responsible for wrecking the entire world. We're responsible. Well, we are, we're responsible for climate change. We're responsible for using too many pesticides, polluting rivers. It's all there, isn't it? That's all our fault. And I just think, maybe we could get out some of the truth by saying the good stuff that we do about biodiversity and not cutting our hedges every 2 years and, to try and encourage all that and the schemes that are available. But I think if we start to plug that too much, people just switch off, don't they? There's the moment of farmers again.
You can get too techie as well and just a little bit too much detail.
Yeah, I think so. And at the end of the day, I do think people who buy food want food. And the majority, I mean, there are a certain group of people who are really interested in the food and where it comes from and how it's got there. But they, I think, tend to be the people that maybe buy like box schemes or, from Riverford or places like that. And I know I'm like putting people in boxes here and saying, if you've got lots of money, you buy a box scheme or you shop at a farm.
Generally, that's true, though.
But it is, because, I mean, like, I'll be totally honest, I'd love to have a Riverford delivery every week, but I can't afford to spend £40 on vegetables and fruits because it's not in our budget. So
it's a great irony of farming often.
Fruit and veg from Aldi or Booths, because Booths are great. I'm going to keep plugging Booths here.
All right, give Booths a plug. There we are.
But they are, because they source from within the 5 counties of where their shops are, and in first instance, and if they can't that, then they go further afield. So there are ways of shopping differently, I suppose, but if you haven't got the budget to do that, you can't do it. So you've got to appreciate that at the same time, that if a family want a roast chicken dinner, there are families that can afford to spend 20 quid on a chicken, and there are families that can afford to spend 4. A little bit of information is great. And if we can get the positive messages out there to say, and just to debunk some of the stuff that goes round and point the arrow in the other direction, say, well, if you want to look at the construction industry, because they're concreting over everything.
Yeah, there's a whole other subject line.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, time is flying though. So yeah, we're gonna wrap things up with the
Okay,
final
cool.
2 questions. First is Cath, if you had a message, talking to the public, if you had a message for the public, any message, what would it be?
I think it would be, go to a farm. If you want to know how it works, go to Open Farm Sunday and go and have a look and talk to the farmers. We did the Cubs visit last night, and God, they were so interested. It was
Yeah.
fab. They just really took it on board. They wanted to take a cow home with them. It's great.
Yeah. I always think you never forget those experiences as well, do you? It's like, when I know I'm pretty biased, but I mean, even every farm I visit, it's like you remember every single one. And certainly at that age, it's going to have such an impact, isn't it?
Well, I think that will, because we happened to have a heifer carving just while they were here. So they
Oh,
actually
wow.
saw a live birth. So we made butter from cream. We made butter in an old butter churn.
Great.
And then they watched a live birth, which was like, we couldn't have timed it any better. I mean, talk about pinnacle of Cubs visits. And then, they ate homemade butter on homemade bread and then went home, they had a fab time. So I'm hoping, they will remember that. And and I think it's important that if you want to know the answers and you want to ask the questions, to get out there and go and visit and go and see for yourself just how great farms are and just what, farmers do.
And like Kath said, yeah, plug for Open Farm Sunday there, which of course it's quite a long time until Open Farm Sunday, but yeah, use social media, get in touch, yeah, find your local farmer. Um, Most people are up for it. So, and the final one is your message for your fellow farmers.
Ooh, this is always a hard one, isn't it? Because I don't want to sound like I'm preaching or
It is.
But I think my message would be to keep talking. Actually, it's a tough job, and winter's coming. And I've said that, haven't I, before? That it's. I'm not looking forward to winter. I've mentioned before, didn't I? Say, oh, our silage is rubbish. It only takes that kind of a comment to open up a conversation, and then that you may be not the only person with rubbish silage, and you're not the only person whose cows aren't milking, and maybe that make you feel a little bit better, or at least make you think that you're not the only one. And I think that's important. And when you go to these meetings, we all moan, don't we, about going to meetings, and we have to go to however many meetings a year and they take up all day, but actually they are quite important. And I thought that when we were in COVID and there was none of that happening, there was no on-farm visits, and we were in our own farm bubble, and we thought everything was really pants and rubbish. But I think a lot of that was because we weren't going to other people's places to see what they were doing, and we weren't talking, and we weren't seeing that other people were struggling too, or not even struggling, just getting by, I suppose. And so just to keep talking and get out there and go to the meeting that you don't necessarily want to go to, because it does help. And I like going to meetings because I'm quite chatty, and I'm always the one that asks the questions, so God, it's urgent.
You're that person.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. Any questions? Yeah, me.
Of course I do. Where do I start? Yeah, no, it's such a good point. And yeah, I think this winter could be quite tough. So yeah, just everyone look out for each other. It's, especially with your local groups as well, isn't it? And yeah, like you say, take those opportunities to get off farm, get onto other farms, and just have a chat with people.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's been great, Kath. Thanks. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, that's all right. No
Leave it
problem. Thank you for asking me.
And
yeah, like a counselling session.
You know what? 95% of my time, I feel like I'm doing that actually.
Yeah, it's funny. I did a podcast with Michael Blanche, the pasture pod.
Oh, great!
And
yeah,
he came here actually, and we sat for 4 hours at the kitchen table, and with his little microphone. And literally, when I'd gone, I was like, "Oh, I think you should train to be a counsellor." He was like, "I know, I think I should."
I was thinking about Michael the other day actually because I want to go back and listen to some of his About Time series.
Yeah, that was the one
Because
you
that was
interviewed me
that
for.
was for it was I thought
Yeah.
that way. I was going to say because I'm trying to think think back because I listened to it at the time, but it was there was so much in it.
Oh, do you
I'm
know, it
really
was,
glad it had the impact it did.
yeah, well, do you know, it was great. And he interviewed Ed Towers as well, who's,
Yeah,
he's local to us. Another chap whose name I can't remember, from down south somewhere. And his was brilliant. He was great. And he just literally told it how it was.
yeah,
It was just fantastic. And I was like, oh, we need more people like that who just go,
yeah.
I don't care anymore. I'm going to tell you how it is.
Right, we'll wrap it up. That is it for today. A huge thank you to my guest, Cath Morley, for coming on the show. Thank you also for listening. Next time, I'll be on a vineyard in Norfolk. What a hard life with John Hemmant. That was a great day. I really enjoyed it. But for now, I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers, and thank you very much for listening.